Yes, sorry, my camera isn't working right, but anyway, I'm here. I'm Bob Gale on Land Conservation Advisory Board, Buncombe County, and Passive Parks Subcommittee.
Excellent. Bob Turner.
Hey, Bob Turner here, Land Conservation Advisory Board and this Passive Rec Subcommittee.
And David.
David Burdett with the Buncombe County Parks and Recreation Advisory Board and the Passive Recreation Subcommittee.
Excellent. Lena. Rachel, is Lena here or did she?
We don't hear you, Lena.
Oh, okay.
There we go.
Oh, weird. Okay. I'm here. Lena Richards, Parks Rec Council, Advisory Council.
Excellent. And Matt?
Matt Fusco, landscape architect, Land Conservation Advisory Board, and Passive Land Recreation Subcommittee.
Excellent. And now can we do an introduction of Parks and Rec staff that's on this meeting?
Yep, I'll just run through all the different county staff who are here. Hopefully I've got everybody noted alphabetically. I'll start with myself though. Rachel Sawyer. I work in strategic partnerships. And I will next pass to Allison. Allison, your audio is not coming through. So that's Allison Danes with Parks and Recreation. Angelica.
Angelica Tyler here with Communications and Public Engagement.
Angelin.
Hey, I'm Angelin Johnson with Strategic Partnerships.
Jennifer.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jennifer Harrison, the Ag and Land Resources Director.
And Wayna.
Good afternoon. My name is Wayna Smith. I am the Community and Equity Analyst for the Equity and Human Rights Office.
Robert.
I'm Robert Brown, Project Manager with General Services.
Sarah.
Hi, I'm Sarah Joss. I'm a Grants Manager with Strategic Partnerships.
And Thomas.
Thomas Gohl, Principal Park Planner with Buncombe County Parks and Recreation.
I think we have made it through county staff. Did I miss anyone? And Kevin, if you wouldn't mind, Angelica would like to offer a quick explanation of that we've got some guests on the Zoom line with us today.
Yeah, certainly.
Thanks, Kevin. So we do have a few community members actually joining us in the Zoom today. We wanted to reach out to those folks who've had technical difficulties in the past with that direct Zoom link. So you might see some unfamiliar names in the participant list. If you are here from the public, we ask that you remain on mute and out of the chat until the public comment period is open at the end of this meeting. Just as you would in any normal board meeting, we wouldn't interrupt the commissioners during their meeting until that open period were called. So we'll go through as people have come through. I'm kind of keeping a list of those who came in, and we'll ask you to unmute during that time. If you have any questions, you can message me directly in the chat at Angelica Tyler. And that should be it.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. Our first piece of agenda today is a vote to approve today's agenda. And I'm going to combine that with a vote to approve the minutes from our August 13th meeting. All in favor of approving today's agenda and last meeting's minutes, please say aye.
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 Aye. Bob Gale.
All right, thank you, everybody. Any opposed, say nay. All right, it sounds like today's agenda last meeting's minutes are approved, and we can move along to Rachel for the passive rec lands application guidelines.
Hey, everybody. So the idea here is to ground ourselves as we head into our funding conversation with the guidelines. This was sent out to you in your packet in advance so that the committee could have it as a reference as you each gave final review and consideration of which projects you wanted to recommend. I did want to take a moment and just point out for members of the subcommittee or anyone following along, when we originally sent out the packet, it had 4 items, which were the agenda, the minutes, the map, which I'm going to show in a minute, and the original funding guidelines. By email, we have sent you today and added to the online public input materials for more materials. The funding recommendation slides that I'm going to go through with you, a funding scenarios workbook, which we're going to look at together. And then another piece of follow-up information that came in related to one of the projects under consideration, which is the Woodman Trailhead project. So we will have that for reference later if and when we need it. And then another batch of the public comments that have been coming in related to the Weaverville watershed and trails project. We're up to 70 something pages of compiled comments that have come in, and we have been sending them to you in cumulative batches. So this one that's published is everything that's come in to date. Quickly, I will display this map and then move us into the discussion of projects for funding to consideration. I think I shared this during the last meeting. We had just created it. Taking a look at the projects that are under funding consideration. They may be a little tricky for you to see. They are these green triangles, each of the proposed projects. Your north and south line here is the 26 interstate, and then east and west you have 40 and 240. So if you look at the county in sort of quadrants, the most projects are in this northeast quadrant, followed by the northwest. And then we do have one down here in the southeast with Camp Greer and Balsam Gardens in the southwest. So that was something the committee wanted to also have as a reference prior to jumping into the funding recommendations. Any questions or comments before I jump in? So, since our last meeting, which was only a week ago, staff sent a survey to each of the members of the subcommittee asking you to work individually to recommend for each project whether or not you'd like to see funding, full funding or partial funding, or not at this time, and to provide comment, particularly on any partial funding or funding restrictions or contingencies that you would want to see taken into account. And we asked the committee to make sure you were thinking about all of the material that has come your way so far, from the very earliest documentation that came in with project applications, as well as the score report from our staff reviewers, the presentations made by our applicants, site visits and follow-up information, as well as subcommittee discussion and the perspective and expertise that each of you bring. So without further preamble, jumping right in, this review that we're going to go through is alphabetical by the applicant name, starting with Asheville Greenworks, Hominy Creek Greenway. This is the Friends of Hominy Creek Greenway Trail Improvements Project. All 7 members of the subcommittee are recommending full funding for this project. Some comments included were a possible contingency related to establishment of the restoration plan that is referenced in the application. A comment related to the legal issues, which I think that they verbally shared with us had been resolved. I would have to go back and see if we've got that in writing, and certainly would want to make sure that an award is contingent upon the resolution of any of those outstanding legal issues.
I do recall that there was a resolution as far as that eminent domain issue with the city, that it had been resolved and that it is currently part of the city now.
Yeah, that's my recollection too. I will make sure we have it documented. Thank you for jumping in, Matt. Modeling the way. I would like anyone to jump in if you have comments or questions as we go. And my intent is to move through the whole slides, and then we can have discussion about kind of what awards might look like. So jump in with questions or clarifications as we go. The second project on the list is Balsam Gardens. This is the property on Sand Hill Road. We were split, 3 supporting full funding, 3 supporting partial funding, and 1 that's saying not at this time. The theme of the comments seemed to be related to the funding amount. The requested dollar amount was different than some of the other projects because it's not a requested grant for a project. This is a property acquisition, and fair market value is mentioned a couple of times here. There would need to be an appraisal and sort of negotiation process so that the price that the county pays for this property is appropriate, allowable, reasonable. So tricky to land on exactly what the right dollar amount is. And that might have been what led 3 people to say partial, as well as just questioning the value of the rate that was proposed, the per acre amount. Camp Greer is the next one on the list. This is the Works Community Forest Trail Development. The majority, or 5 members of the 7, are recommending full funding, with 2 recommending a partial award. One of the comments related to the partial award was about the administrative fee, and I owe you an answer back on this. There was a question, I think, from Anne during the last meeting about whether administrative fees were allowable. And at that moment, I didn't know the answer for sure, but we have confirmed that administrative fees are disallowable. So that $75,000 would not be eligible to be funded by this funding source. Fans or friends and neighbors of Swannanoa, the Woodman Trailhead and Educational Park. I will draw your attention to the item number 7 in your packet. That was the follow-up information. You did not have that follow-up information when you each made your recommendation on whether or not a full or partial award or a no award would be appropriate at this time. The majority of subcommittee members are landing on partial funding at this time.
I have a question on that one, Rachel. This is
Sure.
Bob Gale. They mentioned an option 1, which is, they said, was basically shovel ready. And then they said, or option 2, which would take longer due to negotiations. I'm trying to figure out if option 1 is, what is the one they want? The option they prefer. I wasn't sure about that. but it seems like a bird in hand is worth two in the bush. So if option one is ready to go and that one's resolved, it seems like that would be favorable. But I wondered, if that were chosen, would option two still be something they can negotiate in the future? So I had a little confusion about that.
Sure. I'm going to request, if you wouldn't mind, that we circle back to that question.
Okay. All right.
Once we start talking about what a partial funding award amount might be.
Right.
But I flagged it, and at that time we'll pull up the document and look at it together. My recollection just off the top of my head was that they were sharing an up to amount to give them flexibility. But if the answer is not in front of us, that could be something that we do some follow up between now and the next meeting. So that's my kind of off the cuff answer, and let's circle back.
That's fine. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to sidetrack it there. Just wanted to let you know I was.
Thank you for voicing that. Haw Creek Community Association. This is the Haw Creek Park Greenway. 7 or 100% are recommending full funding for this project. Couple of comments here. None raising a contingency. Riverlink Gateway Park project. A majority, or 6, are recommending full funding, with one member thinking about partial funding, potentially based on access to other funds. Southern Appalachian Highlands Conservancy, the Deer View Mountain Project, all 7 are recommending fully funding of this project. And the comments are listed here for you. A comment about potentially adjusting it if needed. Which we can come, that may be something that comes later in the process. Town of Black Mountain Ridgecrest Connector, 5 out of the 7 are recommending full funding, with 1 person recommending partial funding and 1 person not recommending funding at this time. A suggestion here that the award be contingent on the town securing funding for their engineering and design study, and to put a time frame on that. And some additional supportive comments. Town of Weaverville Watershed Trails and Wildlife Preserve. All 7 members are recommending funding of this project at some level, with 4 recommending a full funding and 3 recommending a partial award. In this case, please note that we've split the comments onto 2 slides. There's a suggestion around a contingency on the award, that the parking issue be resolved and approved by not only the institutions, but also to some extent neighbors. There's a suggestion of what a partial award amount might entail. Some additional comment around traffic and safety, and public comment. Town of Woodfin. This is the Riverside Park Improvement Project. All subcommittee members are recommending funding for this project, with 4 or the majority recommending a full award and 3 recommending a partial award at this time. The comments here are around what a partial award might entail, as well as some additional positive comments. This is the last one, 11 out of 11. Warren Wilson College, improving public access and recreation use of college lands. All subcommittee members are recommending full funding for this project. There's a recommendation here that a possible contingency might be commitment to future Fonto Flora Trail connection. That's something they have verbalized, but I don't know that we've asked for that commitment in writing. So that could be something that we look at as a way to formalize it. And some additional positive comments. So what we've done here with this summary for you is highlighted in green the projects that have majority support for full funding, and highlighted in orange the projects where it is either split or majority support for partial funding. There are no projects that are not being recommended to move forward for funding. What we have in mind to do is to work with you to start talking about what a funding scenario would look like with recommended award amounts for each project, and notation of any contingencies. We would like the subcommittee to build and vote on a scenario that each of you can feel good about supporting as a portfolio, rather than voting one by one for each project. We would like to see a slate of projects voted on and moving forward. So this next phase of plugging in and building this scenario is designed to be done collaboratively, and hopefully to make people that didn't necessarily recommend funding for a project feel comfortable with supporting it as part of an overall portfolio if possible. So we will start working on that scenario in a minute. Between now and the next meeting, staff will conduct additional vetting to make sure the budgets and the scopes and everything aligns with the funding guidelines. So that does give us time, like Bob, I was mentioning to you earlier, gives us time to gather some more follow-up info if needed. And the 17th of September will be the committee's next meeting. We think that the subcommittee will be ready to vote on your funding recommendations at that time. And if so, they would go to the Board of Commissioners as part of their briefing agenda on October 1st, and then go to the Board of Commissioners for a vote of possible approval on October 15th. I'm going to stop my share briefly for any comments or questions or remarks before we start talking funding scenarios.
I'll just make one comment. I think it was with the Woodman. I appreciate their the offer, or the option 1, option 2 scenario. It seems to me that it would still come down to the county and some sort of an appraisal to determine what the easement value would be, even though they have indicated an easement value in their proposal.
Jennifer, is that something that you can speak to?
No, not with confidence. Sorry. But we can do some work on that.
In general, that's my understanding, Matt, although I don't have the easement expertise. So we would need to follow up to get to that exact number.
Rachel, could you bring up that slide that had all 11 projects and the yes/no partial count?
Kevin, did you have a question related to that? Because I have a more general question while we're looking at this. As far as the process goes here, if you look down like at the town of Weaverville, the watershed trails, full funding 4, partial funding 3, given, a majority, because there's 7 members voting, there's already a majority for full funding. Is it decided already for full funding? And the 3 that recommended partial funding, do we still negotiate that? Do we still discuss it? Or because the majorities are already recommended full funding, is it decided already?
Thanks for that question. I don't see anything as decided just yet. So I've got a spreadsheet. It's the one that was in your packet as item 6, funding scenarios. I think we talk about each one. For the ones that are majority for full funding, maybe the starting place for the conversation is to plug in their ask amount and then open up to see if those that didn't recommend full funding want to voice anything that gets the overall group to consider a different funding recommendation. So one more sort of chance as a group to talk about it. And then we would bring it back in the next meeting, and that's when the actual decision or vote would occur.
And I guess in general terms, then, no projects were not recommended for funding. And so if we were to decide on lesser amounts on some projects and there is some balance left over, is the committee here, is our thought right now to hold some monies in reserve for potential future projects, or some projects we may hold money just till they reach certain guidelines that we set or whatever? But are we as a committee planning on staying involved in the future for the next 6 months, a year, or whatever, for possibility of future projects that we may open up, more applications?
I'll jump in with my thoughts, more broad and maybe more to your point, Bob. I guess the way I'm looking at this we'd be spending all the money. I think that the commission has spent a significant amount of it, and if there was a desire to hold back any, that may have come through earlier on. That's just my personal thought. And as far as scoring or determining funding, the process that I've been going over in my head would be is all of the 7 O's rise to the top to start with, and we start with those numbers being allocated to those projects. Then we go through the remainder of the projects that are outstanding and see where those stack up. And then in my review, there was maybe 1, possibly 2 of the 7 well, excuse me, I take that back. I did indicate in comments about potential partial funding if there wasn't enough to go around. So if we got through the process of the 7 O's winning out, then going through the rest of them, and we still were short, consider the others that I might fund less that were part of a 7-0. Because I did indicate full funding on certain things, but we still know there may be items in those packages that might not be able to be funded, which either could free up money or it could be at the detriment of another project somewhere else.
Yeah, this is Bob Gale. I echo what Matt said. I think, in my mind, I think it would make sense to vote all the money out on projects with contingencies, so that it's clear to the commissioners that we want to fund these things, but some things need to be waited on before they can be, all of it could be funded. But so if we say, in my mind, if we say partial funding for this and come up with an amount, but we would want to vote, we would want to support the rest of the funding next year if it took that long for it to happen. So in other words, I'm kind of agreeing with what Matt said and one of your scenarios, Bob. And then on a different related matter, I did want to say for the committee, I have, since filling out the survey yesterday, there's one thing I'd like to change on my vote, and that's that it's very minor, but on the Ridgecrest connector, I would change my vote from partial funding to full funding. I think I was being influenced by a thought that there was maybe more concern among the other members, but seeing the great support for that project, I really wanted to support it in total myself. So I'd like to just change that, Rachel, so there's a 6 and a 0 in the partial funding column, 6 in the full funding, if that's okay.
Sounds good. So Bob, Bob Turner, you had two parts to your question. One was about money left over, which Matt and others attempted to respond to. We're going to talk more about that because the way I see it, it looks like we're going to have money left over. If we funded all projects at their full ask at this time, there would be a small balance. So what happens with that balance? Do we want to provide a recommendation to commissioners from this subcommittee about what happens with it? So that's a question that we need to just make sure that we come back to. And then the other part of your question was what happens with this group, with this passive recreation land subcommittee. I keep accidentally calling you a committee and forgetting it's a subcommittee of two other bodies, LCAB, the Land Conservation Advisory Board, and Parks, Greenways, and Recreation Advisory Board. So you all already have sort of your home-based committee assignments, and this was an over and above assignment. There is a separate bonds oversight committee that does provide an accountability structure for the investment of bond funds in general, to include open space as well as housing. And the passive recreation and LCAB boards will stay as boards. So we could use those existing structures for that oversight and monitoring, and have this subcommittee go dormant or dissolve at the conclusion of the recommendations. I've done a little bit of research and have some more work to do to figure out the how to make it go away if that's the choice. But it doesn't seem like we would keep meeting monthly. There's going to need to be a decision on that. Are you all ready to look at this?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So what you're seeing is a version of what you just had on the screen with the colors, but this is a live spreadsheet. Somebody had suggested we, start with the 7 O's. The idea here is that their funding request is in column F, and a scenario is here in column G. Camp Greer's amount has been reduced to 750,000 even. We talked about that during the last meeting. Town of Weaverville's amount started at north of $1 million, went down, and then they requested to go back up to 952, which is what's reflected here. Town of Woodfin had started higher, and this was their reduced funding amount when they attained some additional funding. So when we look at all of the current request amounts, they total $10,448,000 636. So it looks like we're actually over. I misread this when plugging those other numbers back in. It looks like we're over by about 50,000. I apologize. I think I was remembering what it was like before I made that last adjustment. So if everything were funded at its full funding, we would still have to back 48,636 out. Am I getting that right? I think so.
And that does account for the Camp Greer, the negative, the taking out the 75,000.
It doesn't. It does not. So this is their request amount. So if we wanted to account for that here, I don't know what, hold on one second. Angela and I talked before the meeting about whether or not I should really be the one driving or should I hand this off to another person, but be patient with me. So that one, if we recommended it at 675,000, we start getting in the black.
Right. Thank you.
Whereas
So I guess my thought would be is if we know of things that we can pull out, like that are not part of, well, one question would be is whether or not that Weaverville Watershed Trail long-term maintenance falls into the category of funds that aren't allowable. Is there any other projects that we have and I'm not saying we do on Weaverville yet, but if there's any other project besides Camp Greer that we know that there's ask amounts in there that are not allowed, maybe we back those out first and see where we land.
I don't know of any more at this time. We did remove the $200,000 from Weaverville Watershed and Trails already.
Got it. Okay. And then the next thing would be, I'm not an appraiser, but I would be surprised if the 33 acres on Sand Hill would get 50,000 an acre.
Mm-hmm.
And if you assumed it was say 40,000 an acre, then you'd probably be below your. And I don't think it'll be 40 either, but I'm not qualified to make that call here.
Yeah, Rachel, I think some of the so if we could have column G populated, anything that is full funding with a vote of 700, let's go ahead, highlight those at their full value, and they can be off the discussion table. And then we have a number of projects that have 0 for no funding, but a number greater than 0 for partial funding. And so if we can go through, and if there is some unanimity between subcommittee members where it's like, hey, we all agree we want to fund this, but there's still a question mark as to value, like the 33 acres on Sand Hill. And if we could kick those ones back to staff or if we could, in the package to propose this, we're like, yes, we want to fully fund this. However, we have a legal obligation to do more due diligence. So the appraisal or the approval from this subcommittee would say, yeah, we're pretty unanimous in saying this project should go forward. However, the county is obligated to do more due diligence, and this is our cap. We don't want to go over it, and neither does the landowner need us to go over it. But can we propose these with a little bit more of a live number to them? And then if we can have a little bit of unanimity in agreement to that, like if we can be 7-0 to say like, hey, once we figure out what the actual value of this, we approve it. Then we can highlight that green to go with just a footholder of their funding request. And then the ones where they have specific things have been disallowed by bond language. I mean, very clearly, let's remove those and fund the full amount minus those that we all have agreement on, that's how much we want to reduce it by. And then we can go into anything that has a vote of do not fund in column E, and then open those up for discussion. If we can move forward with that and all seven of us are in agreement that the full funding and partial funding, that's how we want to propose it, then I think we can expedite this to a place where we'll all be in agreement here.
I think that's a good suggestion, Kevin, though. If the only concern I have is if we are going to try and vote September 17th, could we do things like Balsam Gardens get an appraisal in the next few weeks, that one that we trust,
The thing is that would require bond or essentially bond money to do the appraisal. So I don't know if there's a mechanism in place for us to hire out an appraisal, unless there's somebody in Parks and Rec who has the qualifications to do that.
or we throw it back to the property owner and say, we like the project, but can you give us some third-party appraisals? I don't know if you throw that just at real estate agents or what do you do that you could get it done quick, but is it possible to throw it back at the owner and say, look, we got 6 for full or partial funding right now. You'll get some money. We just want to get a firmer grasp on numbers here. Where you got your number from? I mean, did he just make it up?
For that 33 acres, he pulled it out of, like, he made his own comparable and was shooting from the hip, I think.
On Woodman, a real estate professional would be qualified to do a comparable analysis, which would not take the extent or detail as an appraisal. But it seems to me that for final appraisal, that's going to have to be something the county would approve. And I don't know that it would be possible to do an appraisal per county standard and get feedback before we have to make a decision.
That's where I'm kind of inclined as well. Putting a placeholder that feels like it would cover it might be necessary if we're going to move this as a recommendation forward within the time frame.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then it comes back to kind of what Bob Turner's original question was about how much we meet after this. I think what I hear Kevin saying is the projects that are majority approval, there needs to be an avenue where we can approve those proposals.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I think that I wrestle with, we have to approve all this money in one thing. Well, we don't have enough information to me on 4 projects, maybe 5, but the other 7 seem to have majority, rule. And I mean, someone's always going to be unhappy if someone votes against it. Well, that's, 6 people vote yes and 1 votes no. That's why you're on a committee. I mean, it's democracy. But these other kind of 4 projects, definitely the Balsam Gardens, the Friends and Neighbors of Swannanoa, we need more conversation on. And I would actually think the town of Weaverville and the town of Woodfin, that there needs to be conversation between committee members. Like those 4 need to be kind of taken out so we can gather whatever that information is. I hear the comments, but like when 3 people, like the town of Weaverville, I voted for full funding, but in full disclosure, I was teetering both ways. Like, I'm like a, partial. I mean, there were just so many questions about that project. It seems to me like, is there a way for us to vote yes on 7 of them, get that presented to the board and say, these are good. We need more information on the other 4. Even if I believe the Weaverville Watershed Trails Wildlife Preserve should be funded, I think there's a lot of questions that need to be answered for both the community and for the committee members. And so it's the time, I think this is Bob's, I remember back at 2 months ago, the time frame, it's pressure for us. And you look at those dollar amounts between those 4 projects, that is the majority of our funds. I mean, it's 3 million, basically $1 million, $1.6 million, and $1.6 million. And it seems like we need more information to spend $6 million or something. I mean, is there a way for us to propose the ones that, have it ready to go and then get more information on those other ones and just conversation? Because, the Balsam Gardens, what is it that people, the no funding versus partial funding, what does that look like? So that we can get more information to decide what we're voting on.
Mm-hmm.
anecdotally, and I know that we can't rely on the appraisal values in the county website, generally speaking, that property for Balsam Gardens is on the property card appraised at $176,000. Now, if you gave it a market adjustment, it would go up maybe, but would it go up to 1.6 million? So when you think of the other ones, I guess one comment I'd make on, I don't know what all the questions are on Riverside, but on Weaverville, I know that parking is obviously a big hot topic. There are questions, I think, on all these projects. If you were to go in there and parse it down to DOT access, what does the parking lot look like? How many, whether it's going to have accessible parking, all of those, there's some of those items in other projects that I would note are some of the questions that that have been raised here. And in a normal process of development, while the town of Weaverville might have been able to do a little bit more due diligence going into it, they would have a process that they would have to go through with DOT regardless. With Riverside, they've probably already gone through that process for access to a state road, what the stacking requirements are going to be, what the site distances are going to be. And so in some respects, we're assuming on other projects that will be taken into account. But because it became an issue on this project, we're asking that question. So I'm not suggesting that I have an opinion one way or another, but if we're going to ask it of one project, then we should ask it of all of them.
So I'm just going to jump in here and really ask a question more than enlighten anything. I know in other projects that I work on, anything that the county is purchasing, we cannot pay more than appraised value. I'm not sure if we have any leeway based on the bond funds here, and if public benefit adds into that in any way. But I think that's one answer that we would need. What, especially as you point out on the Balsam Gardens, we'd need to understand what would be permissible. And then the second question, the idea of appraisal. Rachel, can we get some clarity on whether we can spend bond funds to do land acquisition appraisals? And then just to echo what I've heard, time could be a serious deterrent on that. I know that the appraisals that we work on the conservation side can take months to get done. So we may have some time issues there. And I say that more to raise awareness of the committee. I don't know that it hinders the projects, but just in thinking about our timeline, that may hold us back a little.
Jennifer, that was very helpful. Thank you for those comments. Very helpful. So is it possible for us to get back to Balsam Gardens, for instance, and say we approve up to your requested amount, 1.63 million. However, that's the funding you're going to get is based on a formal appraisal that the county has to do. If that's the answer from the county, yeah, we can't put any money towards land unless there's an appraisal, which that makes sense. Would Balsam Gardens be willing to continue moving forward with their request in this project if we put that kind of contingency on it to say, we've approved up to 1.6 million, but you're only going to get what the appraisal amount is. Are you willing to move forward? Or do you think you can sell it for more money to somebody else, more than the appraised value? Do you think, is that a viable approach for this subcommittee?
Bob, I could comment a little bit on that. When we met I was on the site visit, and they did acknowledge that they understood there would need to be appraisals done in order to finalize whatever transaction there might be. In my experience, it would be typically the buyer who would do the appraisal. Skeptics out there, I guess, wouldn't want the seller to do it because they might get a different number. But all things aside, That's just been my experience. So I do like the raising the question with the county of, what does that look like in terms of how the process works so that they can land on the number, and if there's anything that they could feed us information with that would be helpful in our decision making.
And Matt, when in other projects that I've been involved with where the county was offering or exploring buyout, if the landowner was unhappy with the appraisal, we did welcome them to get their own appraisal. And then there's a process for comparing the two and seeing if there's a middle ground, or if the county's original appraisal was too low, or so there is opportunity for exploring or negotiating that, generally speaking.
So I think we will gain what additional information we can gain between now and the next meeting. And then there will be sort of an appetite question for this subcommittee between, do we send it forward with an up to amount? Or do we hold off on a funding recommendation until that diligence has occurred, knowing it might be months and this could be a next spring kind of situation? Either way, go ahead.
Do we run afoul with, because I know in the application window we were giving out timelines. Are we held responsible to those timelines, or are those seen as like a loose guideline?
I didn't see our county attorney join on this call. We've already passed our intended timeframe for announcing awards, which was July. And so being ready with the first round of awards, I usually see in our procurement documents, something giving us the flexibility to follow whatever timeline we need to.
This question came up in our last Land Conservation Advisory Board meeting as well, and it was a concern that the folks who have submitted their applications have done so with an expectation that there would be some form of response within a time frame, whether that's something that is identified in county code or not, I don't know, but there was a bit of a concern. What's public record, I think that it was the Deaver view, because of the situation with the funding and some things expiring, the sooner the better for them. Didn't sound like pushing it to September 17th would be an issue, but if it pushed beyond that, it might be. I'll just make one other comment. I will not be at the next meeting, and I guess if I was to make a choice today, I would probably back out the differences of whatever we know can't be funded, and I'd probably back off of Balsam Gardens, and I would be comfortable approving everything contingent and getting to the number. And then if there was a difference in Balsam Gardens at the end of the day, maybe that could be worked out at the end. Not from us, our standpoint necessarily, but that I would be willing to take that chance, I guess is what I'm saying. I know we may not vote on that today, but that would be my thought. And since I won't be at the next meeting, I thought I'd put it out there.
Matthew, I'm going to agree with you because I feel like we need to just make a decision and move on.
It looks like, Kevin, you might have just switched to a different device. How would you like to proceed? I'm going to look to you as chair on helping, guiding staff on how to help the subcommittee forward in the next 15 or 20 minutes that you've got today.
I think it's pretty clear for the 7, as David mentioned, that we're pretty in agreement with. I'm personally a fan of, we need more information on the 4 that were highlighted. I don't think we could get all those questions resolved by September 17th. There's a big part of me that would like to see another one of those questionnaires go out now that we all have an insight to where the subcommittee is standing, to see if we can get more of those partial fundings to vote into full funding so we can show 700. The people giving those 3 no votes, I'm curious to see their insight, saying like, okay, why are we getting a no on this? And then on the partial funding for the 4 in question, if we can be unanimous on, it seems to be everyone for Balsam Gardens is saying like, hey, we want this, but we would not be doing our due diligence if we didn't get a fair market value appraisal of that. So to me, I feel like we can reach a pretty good, or at least I feel, given what I've heard from other committee members, that we can agree that we do want it, save for that 1 no vote. But
just
there's
to-
still a big question mark.
Just
Yeah.
to clarify, those initial votes, I see that as a poll to help kind of guide this conversation. You're not held to, and nor do we. I certainly can go back for Bob Gale's previous request to move your vote from one position to another on the previous responses. But in my view, once that was sort of a point in time, and we're moving toward hopefully again that portfolio vote as opposed to a project by project vote.
Well, Kevin and Rachel, just to address one of them, I think that's where the conversation has to come in between those 4 projects. Because I'll be just transparent. I'm the one that voted no to Balsam Gardens, and I voted no for all the reasons that people voted partial funding. It's a lot of money to pay for 33 acres that can't. There's not going to be a lot of use necessarily to it right now. It's just for land acquisition. So my no vote is based off the price of the property versus what it is. And I hear everybody say, well, if we got the property closer to what we think the value is, people would be willing to pay for it. So I think in essence, the partial funding people and me, the no fund, are the same in that I think we're overpaying for 33 acres, and I think the money can be spent better somewhere else. But if you came back and said it was only $500,000, I'm not saying it will be, but then I might be pushed to the funding part. And I think that's where the conversation comes in is, why are people saying partial funding? What part are they saying partial funding for? Because my no vote, like you said, could easily be changed to a yes vote if it was for a different amount maybe or something.
So could I offer a possible proposal for voting? Could we go ahead and adopt the full funding for the 7 projects and get that off our slate now, and then we could focus in on the ones we've been talking about the whole time?
I would second your motion, Bob.
Okay.
Okay.
Rachel, we're missing 1 green on the line 8, the Deaverview Mountain. That $1 million is a full. Yeah.
Thank you.
And Rachel, we're voting officially on the September 7th meeting, correct? We're just looking for some direction for creating a package.
That was the plan, but if we leave today with some initial votes, that's also okay. I couldn't tell if the motion was like to just pause discussion or to actually approve it.
Yeah, well, my motion was, it sounds like everybody's pretty unanimous. If nobody has any problems with it, I'm making the motion that we approve the 7. And then we're done with that, and we can focus on the ones we're having the big questions on.
Hey, Bob, just for a point of clarification, on what Rachel has up here right now, she has Camp Greer funded at $675. Are you proposing that we fund Camp Greer at the full requested amount or at the $675?
Okay, that's right. We've changed that one.
I I think 675 was pretty unanimous amongst those two partial funding votes. And
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, I just want to make sure that we have it
Yeah,
on the
yeah.
record. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be, I'd be okay with that. Uh-huh.
okay. And David, are you going to second that motion?
I will second that motion.
Okay. Yeah, let's hold a vote on these 7 highlighted in green. All full funding, save for Camp Greer that has had their administrative fees deducted from the ask price. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay.
I'm gonna say nay because
Oh.
it's somewhat contingent. One of those projects is contingent on how we land on the others for me.
Which one is that?
Well, if we fell short and we had gone through the full list, in my mind, the 2 that were pretty big asks, Beaver View and Riverside would take a little bit of a haircut to keep us to the limit.
Okay.
But I'm not gonna, if it's a vote and I am allowed to do a nay, that's fine by me. I have no qualms with that. If the board feels that, or committee feels that those are, it's what we're here for.
And for illustration's sake, Matt, for a second, I'm going to copy this in to show you that we won't fall short.
And I do want to add that the 1 million for Deaverview was absolutely essential. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to acquire the land.
If all 4 projects that are in yellow get their full award, we have 26,000 still on the table. So I don't see a scenario where that haircut is necessary. In addition, it's sounding like 1 or more of these 4 is going to end up at a lower amount.
Okay, well, in that case, I'd vote for all of them. And then whatever's left, we would ask the commissioners to hold back for the next round of bond funds.
Okay. So is that a unanimous vote, yay, for these 7 projects? And then for the 4 in question, Rachel, I believe we need to put the onus either on staff or the organizations asking for the money. Can we run that past legal as far as the appraisals needed to figure out the fair market values? If that's something that we can rely on the applicants or that will need to come internally from the county?
I'll get some clarification about the appraisal process for these 2 items that have acquisition or conservation, either direct acquisition or conservation acquisition. I do need a little more clarity on the follow-up for the 2 municipal projects.
Yeah,
Personally, I would be okay putting Balsam and Friends and Neighbors of Swananoa with a contingency based on appraisal. I mean, to me, it seems like that's something that's the county's due diligence as they're going through the process. And if we have the money here, then I would approve those 2 personally and would recommend to the commission that any leftover funds after proper appraisals are done be utilized towards a future bond or whatever that terminology is or however we want to phrase it. But
So that's a motion. I'd second it.
So, but Matt, what you're proposing then is we could approve those 2 right now up to this requested amount, but the amount that they're actually going to get is going to be based on the appraisal. And we approve it that way with that contingency, right?
That's
right now, do you think?
Contingent upon appraisal.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Bob, did you second that? Because I think I would.
Yes, I did.
I need more information about what option you're going with. As a reminder, the majority of subcommittee members wanted to do a partial award for Woodman, and the comments theme tended to be around acquisition, not development.
That's correct.
So when we look at their acquisition options, they've given us number 1, which is the more of a, I think you called it more of a sure bet on the south side of the river, and option 2, more alignment on the north side of the river. The dollar amounts are not that far from one another. They're proposing 504,000 as the cost, which they explained down below that they still feel confident in. For option 1, 544,500 for option 2. And so their request was, please fund us at option 2 in order for us to select one option over the other based on how negotiations lead to most favorable terms and greenway alignment.
Well, that clarifies my question early on in the meeting. Thank you, Rachel. So that's what they're really requesting, was the 544.
So based on their original request having a more than only acquisition, but based on the majority seeming to favor just the acquisition portion, if we use the 544.5 figure, it could still carry the up to the appraised value.
Yeah, that's what I would support. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with that too. By the way, I want to mention that Allison, I think, was trying to raise her hand. I think we need to hear whatever question she had.
Thank you, Bob. Can you all hear me? I know there was a problem with my mic.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. I just wanted to point out that the request from Camp Career, I believe, was made on the desire and assumption of a move of grant funds from a state award of 200,000. They were looking at a change in scope in order to attain the price that they had. And that change of scope would need to be approved through our federal funder before we could move forward with awarding them any funds based on the scope that they're proposing. That is a change. Does that make sense? Did I say that clearly?
Allison, I think you're saying, would the committee consider making this award contingent on aligning to the state funding?
Correct.
That makes sense to me. I mean, I think I agree with that. That contingency.
So quick time check, Kevin. It's 1:10. We could probably talk for another 5, maybe 10 minutes before we move into public comment if we want to end by 1:30 as scheduled.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with proposing a package that contains these two values that we're saying, like, hey, this is a theoretical cap, depending on appraisals, so they're more soft numbers with a hard ceiling. However, David did bring up that, like, on the Balsam Gardens one, there is a ceiling at which it feels to be too much. And are we saying in line 10 and 11 for Weaverville and Woodfin that those are still ones that we want to search for more information? I want to get some unanimous approval on Balsam, Friends and Neighbors of Swannanoa, Weaverville, and Woodfin. If we're all comfortable with the numbers in column G, and that being in line G10 and G11, 0 and 0 currently, as what we will propose at the September 17th meeting.
Well, yeah, I think that's a good point. That Balsam Gardens property is 90% in the floodway, which means that there will not be any development happening. And on projects that I've worked on recently, I've seen land for development go for around 30,000 an acre versus 50, much different scenario. So it's not really a comparable, but knowing that we're in the floodway,
$30 an acre at 33 acres would put that in at $1 million. So that would
right, 30,000, yeah, 30,000 acre would still, so that would still be well within That would be a high number for that site, in my opinion, but it would kind of bring it down to earth a little bit from what we're seeing, if that makes everybody more comfortable.
Yeah, so that's if we want to say that column G as populated now, does anyone have any objections to G3, G5, G10, and G11 on this spreadsheet? Okay.
I need to get more information before we end today about what the subcommittee is hoping we can bring back for the municipal projects.
Bob, I believe you had something on the Weaverville watershed. I forget who had the objections over the parking and having community buy-in of what that project's going to look like.
Bob, meaning Gail, or?
Yeah,
Turner?
Bob Gale, sorry.
Yeah.
Or whoever has the objections, please speak.
I didn't have objections. I voted for full funding because I wanted to make sure they had enough money to do the corrections to parking that are needed to make it more safe. But that gets into such design that I can't say that. I feel like they have the expertise, they've got the professionals, they know the problem, and they asked for more money so they could add that extra parking area. So I've supported full funding for that reason, but I do.
You kind of want like an engineer appraisal and design to get a more accurate project cost.
Yeah, that's needed.
Yeah, those are the kind of details we're looking for. We want actionable items that we can go back to the folks asking.
Yeah.
And Kevin, I had the comment in there as well for partial funding. This is Bob Turner. Because I recalled that the applicant did state that they could stage out the trail building system. And I think, it's been good this meeting to hear where other members stand as far as, are we trying to save some funds for future projects? Do we want to set something aside? And so part of my partial suggestion was, could we award them some funds now, build out some trail systems, just see what kind of traffic we really get on this trail system, and how much the parking system needs to be engineered. We need to figure that out, obviously. But
the long-term upkeep will be, particularly on this project, the responsibility of the town of Weaverville. So if the project's getting more traffic than anticipated, that onus would be on the town of Weaverville, because likely by the time you see that overuse, these bond funds will have expired.
Yeah. So are we recommending then, Bob Gale, that would you say plug it in a number here for the Weaverville watershed project on just the condition of engineered design?
I would only throw out that if we do it here, we should do it on other projects, because there's other projects that did not provide engineering design. For instance, the Camp Greer, Hawk Creek, they did show some engineering design, but they didn't show final. So I think that's something we just need to consider. And obviously the engineering cost is not part of what's available in the bond, so they would have to go out separately and get that money.
Right.
Or have it.
Right. And I see this project, the Weaverville project, as being one that needs, I don't know, the right word is alarmingly needs focus on this design. The other projects are easily accommodated, I think, and designed. So I wouldn't feel like we needed to do it on every project, but this one clearly needs it, in my opinion. I'm not sure how to come out on the funding, but I guess I'm a little bit unsure about that. And I have basically in my mind too, I don't want to be a party to voting for something if it ends up leading to major accidents and deaths down the road. I'd have that on my mind. So I just feel like it's the town of Weaverville really needs to address this, but I'm mixed on the funding of this particular project. It's the most troublesome one I have here.
We have made a lot of progress during today's meeting, getting a majority agreement on the majority of the projects. We still have a full 90-minute meeting in September to try to land on what the decision is on these two. As staff, I would point out that as of your independent work, 100% of you wanted to fund both of these projects at some level.
Yeah.
So perhaps that could be a bit of homework that staff will gather what diligence we can to help support you, and that each of you go back and reconsider and review the information and see what you feel like you would be comfortable supporting.
Hey, Rachel, can I ask you just as I know we're finishing up soon. It's on Matt's question about the engineering required for all the projects. That might be something to bring up with legal in the sense that even though we may require something from the Weaverville watershed, questions have been raised. So it wasn't like we required them to do it. That there were questions and concerns raised after a site visit. I went to the Works Community Forest Trail. That doesn't have any kind of there's no danger. So I guess the point being is legally we're required to get an engineering report from everybody. We may not be required to because concerns haven't been raised by both outside entities and committee members. Bob went to the site. He has concerns. I know the site. I grew up in Asheville and drove on that road as a kid. I know what the people are talking about. And so I just maybe we need to find out legally, can we require one project to do something and not another one? I think we can because questions have been raised, but we might want to get clarification on that.
Got it. Thank you.
Good point, David. Thanks.
Jennifer's got her hand up.
Yeah, I just want to check for understanding because we've had an official vote and I want to make sure we understand what we voted on. Because we voted on column G, but that, Rachel, is your understanding for the notes that we voted on those projects to be actually approved and recommended to the commissioners, or were we voting in support of these projects, but we are using the next meeting to get some questions answered before that's a final yes or no on the projects?
Thanks for asking that clarification question. The items that were voted on are in green, and that's definitely something I need to know as staff. Is this certain that these will be included in the recommendations that go to commissioners, or would you like a second vote to affirm that next month?
If we're doing additional due diligence on these four and we can get more information, I think we could vote in September on a full package that includes these green highlighted column G numbers. It was my understanding in the vote that was those highlighted in green right now, we are approving as a subcommittee to go to commissioners.
Got it.
That was my intention also, so that we wouldn't have to be getting into the weeds discussing things about them. We could focus on the ones we really have concerns about. Question.
And it is also true that you are not voting to take these to commissioners at this time. You are voting to hold on those until we have the full package and not piece this out to commissioners.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So we didn't really, I don't know if we have time to discuss the wood thinning project. Those that voted for partial funding. We've touched on the other ones. Do we have time to talk about that project, or?
It depends on how much of a hard stop people have. Angelica, do you know how many public commenters we have?
You have at least 5 that I see right now.
So that's 15 minutes at 3 minutes each.
I think we need to give them the attention, considering the technical problems we've had. We do need to hear them.
Okay, and Matt has to jump off, so we can continue the discussion on the last 2 in our September meeting and move forward to public comment.
Thank you. I'll be our timekeeper today. I'm just going to go down the list I've seen, trying to get to everybody. I will call time at 3 minutes. If you could stop at that time, that would be great. Thank you. And first, I have Gary Weiner.
Gary, if you're speaking, you're muted. We can't hear you.
Not sure if Gary's wanting to do public comment, but the next one I had was Tony Matola. Tony, if you'd like to get off mute, you can start your public comment.
Yeah, I got it. I don't know. I didn't request for public comment, so I'm just listening and observing.
Okay, thanks, Tony.
Welcome.
Next, I have Mark Hunt.
Hi, folks. Mark Hunt here.
If you'd like to get off mute, you can start your public comment.
Yeah, I got it. I don't know.
Hey, Mark, I think you're probably watching the live stream in another tab.
Okay, I think I fixed it. Can you hear me now? Great,
Yeah,
thanks. Hey, I ran the campaign. I was the director of the campaign for the bonds 2 years ago. Implementation was great. Kudos to this committee, to staff. I'm also involved in the Woodfin project and would like to highlight some things. Shannon Tuck, who knows I'm commenting today, sent a follow-up document for the last meeting, explaining a few things. I just want to highlight them. I know there's some orientation within the subcommittee to partial funding. I'd like to highlight what that might mean. The team has used exhaustive efforts for years to raise money from others. We're not confident at all that there are other sources to make up a shortfall if there's partial funding here. One view might be, well, the Woodfin taxpayers can just bear the burden. The average Woodfin taxpayer is in for $759 into this project already. Buncombe County taxpayers, if this is approved, would be in for about $15 each. So there's a question of equity among which taxpayers pay for what is really a ultra regional facility, a regional facility. As well, the current contract for construction has a fairly narrow timeline of the next few months in order to activate what are called options under the contract. And if funding is not available to fund those phases, then they would be removed from the contract at some point. Shannon Tuck could better speak to that. But among the things that are in play as contingencies based on funding availability include fairly fundamental things like being able to cross a stream that runs midway through the park. The funding requested here pays for that trail crossing, stream bank restoration, a number of paving and other amenities that would support passive use. If funding is not gathered by this cutoff for activating those elements in the contract, we could end up with a very unfinished looking and functioning park. So I want to make sure committee members don't go away with the view that, oh, it'll be fine if it's underfunded, or the town could raise the money elsewhere or burden its own taxpayers. There is a lot in play and it's fairly critical. I just wanted to emphasize those things that Shannon tried to relay at the last meeting. And by the way, I'm not clear what the questions the committee has are about the Whitman project. I was a little distracted during this meeting. If there are just a few or questions, I'd be glad to try to address those here as a follow-up. I'm quite familiar with the project.
We're at time, Mark.
Thanks.
Thanks, Mark.
Next, I have Emily Boyd. Emily, make sure you come off mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Emily, make sure you're off of the live stream and any of your open tabs or on any other devices. Otherwise, you'll have feedback.
Yes, thank you. I was on the queue the other way, the phone in way too, was what you were just hearing, but I just hung up on that one. First, I want to thank the subcommittee for taking our neighborhood's concerns seriously. In the notes, I noticed that one of the subcommittee members encouraged Weaverville to explore access from Eller Cove or somewhere on the Reeves Creek side. And I would like to encourage all of y'all to encourage them to do that. There are several options that the town has not yet pursued. I've been looking into this for a month, and I know that there are a lot of potential options. Removing the access points to the trail system from Elk Mountain Scenic Highway and acquiring other land for parking would have a number of benefits. It would allow Weaverville to access through land not in a conservation easement. And if they acquired that land, they would be able to install adequate off-road parking without the restrictions imposed upon the amount of parking by the easement. It would also give them land on which they could build maintenance facilities or bathrooms or any number of things they wanted to do in the future. And they currently don't have land for any of that because it's all in conservation easement right now. Parking area off of Elk Mountain Scenic Highway will allow the town of Weaverville to gate the driveway, allowing the possibility of closing at night or when the trail conditions are such that use may damage them. People already park on the shoulder of Elk Mountain Scenic Highway near Buzzards Rock, so it would be more difficult to close the trails completely if the access was from up here. Eliminating access from Elk Mountain Scenic Highway greatly reduces the chances of the trail system and parking areas being vandalized or used overnight by partying teenagers and other people. Those problems already exist on Elk Mountain Scenic Highway, and it would only be increased by adding public parking and access to the trail system from Elk Mountain Scenic Highway. An access point on the Weaverville side would cut the time for Weaverville staff and to the park. It would cut it by about half from about trails. Moving the parking area off of our busy, narrow, winding through road will make for safer entry and exit for visitors and the neighboring community. It's my understanding that the grant funds can be used for costs associated with procuring land and developing a parking area. The original proposed trail system was designed with a phased installation. It seems that the town of Weaverville could delay phase 3 or phases 2 and 3 in order to fund the acquisition and development of a dedicated safe parking area now. And then I'm not clear on what y'all are going to do with the remaining grant funds that you don't initially dole out, but perhaps they could request more to fund the last few phases after they have figured out the parking area and funded that first.
We're at time.
Thank you, Emily.
Thanks, Emily.
And we have one more person waiting on the virtual call line. I'm going to patch them in now.
Hello.
We hear
Hello,
you.
Can you
we
hear
can
me?
hear
This
you.
is Jill Raymond.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Well, I want to say what Emily, also said is to thank the subcommittee for taking our road seriously. And I really do appreciate what I'm hearing. And And, you know, I've been thinking about this probably the same as Emily, and I thought, you know, this really doesn't add anything for the Weaverville resident. I don't know what the average age is in your town, but to drive up a twisty turny road and go drive into a dangerous parking lot, you know, right next to people's homes, I don't see the benefit. It's about 20 minutes from town hall up to the parking area, and it's twisty turny, and it's a lot of blind curves and switchbacks. I don't know how many people would be doing that, and I think that that does need to be acknowledged and recognized, that the benefit is very low for the Weaverville resident. And I concur what Emily said about researching other options, you know, securing a parking area where you can put in the facilities, the restroom facilities in time, and have a growth piece to that area, the parking area. To me, that just makes good common sense, rather than going willy-nilly on Elk Mountain Scenic Highway and hoping no one gets hurt. And I'm the first time hearing that everyone is recognizing that people can get hurt. So I'm really happy about that. Other piece is that I think most people will be coming up from the Asheville side. So with the 2 parking lots proposed, the first one you'll get is the most dangerous one. So you've got a family coming up, there's 2 cars, there's only 1 parking place left in the first one. So I think it's human nature that someone's going to say, oh no, let's not separate. It's about a mile apart, and the parking area. And it's human nature. We say, oh no, let's just park on the side of the road. Here's someone's driveway, or here's, you know, something, you know, over here. It'll be dangerous, but it's worth it. We see that all the time on Rattlesnake Lodge. I mean, the parking on the side of the road is just, you know, off the charts, especially on the weekends and in the summer months and the holidays. So, you know, I just want you all to think about that. And if you've gone in 2 cars, you know, and you've got to drive another mile up to the other parking area where you can't even see it because blind curves are there, and it's across the street from a place that, you know, people go and party, and there's liquor bottles and all kinds of dangerous items. I mean, I just don't see the family-friendly component to that, because there isn't a family-friendly component to it. There's a dangerous component to it. And as an Elk Mountain resident, and, you know, I'm really happy to hear that the flags are going off, and that there is some concern to this area. And, you know, because there is no place to pull over other than people's driveways. And I'm sure if someone put a parking lot next to your driveway on a dangerous road, I think you might think, well, that wasn't very kind, and that wasn't well thought out. So
we're at time.
I appreciate your time. Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you.
I want to make sure I haven't missed anyone in the participant list. If you are still on the Zoom and you would like to participate in public comment, would you please unmute and get started? If not,
Hi, Tony Mattoli here. Yeah.
Go ahead.
As a resident of Elk Mountain Scenic Highway, I completely agree with Bob Gale's concerns and the points that were raised by Emily. I think those are all very valid points, and one that I would hope that your subcommittee would take to heart very seriously. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. I don't have anyone else waiting on our online platform. I think our public comment is done.
All right, thank you very much, Angelica. Today's meeting is adjourned. Our next meeting will be September 17th. Look forward to seeing everybody there.
Goodbye, everybody. Good meeting. Good work.